Hi guys, it's me again, and we're into week 2 of the lockdown. Now, for some of you, maybe things are getting a bit easier, maybe the fear has worn off. For some of you, maybe that fear has just kind of ramped up another level as you've picked up on what is happening in the world, what is happening in the country, and maybe even what is happening at home with your mom and dad. Maybe there's a little bit of tension that you're picking up on. Maybe there's things that are being said, things that aren't being said that you're very, very well aware of. And so that fear has just ramped up another level. And it seems like you're right in the middle of a storm, and you can't see an end to the storm. In fact, all you see is the potential for this storm that COVID-19 has caused to get worse. Well, what do we do when life throws us into the middle of the storm? Well, tonight I'd like to take a story out of the Bible, out of the New Testament, that teaches us about what to do when life puts us into the middle of the storm. And the story that I'm talking about comes out of Luke chapter 8, and you can read it in Luke 8 verses 22 to 25. And it's a story that after having ministered for a while, Jesus and the disciples climb into a boat, and Jesus says, we're going to go across the other side of the lake of Galilee, and we're going to carry on our ministry there. And no sooner do they climb into the boat and they take off than Jesus falls asleep, and they're about a third to half the way across, and the storm comes up. And it starts really, really, beating the boat, swamping the boat. The waves are crashing in over the bow of the boat and over the sides. And the disciples are doing all that they can, one, to keep the boat upright, and two, to keep it from sinking. They're bailing for all they're worth. They are lashing down the sails. They are doing everything that they know how. And still the storm rages. They are afraid. They are afraid of sinking. They are afraid of drowning. But all the time that they are afraid, Jesus is still fast asleep in the back of the boat in the middle of this storm. And the thing is that like the disciples, when life throws a storm at us, sometimes we forget that Jesus is with us. We become so focused on the circumstances, on the situation, on the storm threatening to overwhelm us, that we forget He is with us. We forget what He has said to us. We forget that He's actually said to us that there is going to be something else to come. Maybe He has said to you that there is something that He has planned for you or for your family, or maybe He said that to your parents and they have just forgotten. Because remember, Jesus said we are going to go to the other side of the lake. But sometimes the circumstances threaten to overwhelm us. And the disciples in this instance had forgotten that Jesus said we are going to go to the other side of the lake. And so sometimes it becomes all too easy for us to forget that Jesus has told us that there is another step for us to take. And we become so afraid and caught up in the circumstances that we lose sight of what Jesus has already told us. So what did the disciples do in the storm? They did everything that they could think of to do. Remember that some of the disciples were skilled fishermen and sailors. This was their livelihood. This is what they had been doing all of their lives. From the very time that they were the age that some of you guys are. They had been fishing and learning how to fish and learning about the lake and what the weather that the lake could kick up. These guys weren't dumb. They weren't stupid. They knew how to handle themselves in the boat. But in this storm, it was just too much for them. They couldn't deal. They couldn't cope with it. And so when they'd done all that they knew how to do, what did they do? When they have reached the limit, exhausted all of their resources, all of their knowledge, what do? They turn to Jesus. Now, why did it take them that long to turn to Jesus? Well, maybe they didn't want to disturb him because they thought that he was too tired. Maybe they didn't believe that he could help. You see, remember that Jesus started life out as a carpenter, somebody that worked with his hands and molded and shaped wood. He wasn't a fisherman. He wasn't a sailor. What could a carpenter know or do differently than experienced fishermen and sailors? But they do. They do turn to Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Jesus gets up and he speaks to the storm, he speaks to the wind, he speaks to the waves, and it dies down. He then turns to the disciples and says to them, "Where is your faith?" Now this could mean a couple of things. It could mean that I told you that we would go over to the other side of the lake. Why didn't you believe that we would get there? If I have told you that we are going there and that is where I need to be, then we are going to get there. Why didn't you believe that that was going to happen? It could also have meant that he was asking them, why did you first try to get through the storm on your own? Why didn't you come to me at the very start? I could have saved you all the trouble, all the stress, all the worry, all the fear right from the very beginning. We could have had plain sailing all the way across. But instead you try to deal with it, you try to cope with it on your own. So what does this mean for us today? What is Jesus asking those questions? What are the disciples, the actions of the disciples? What is this whole story? What could it possibly mean for us today? Well, I think that maybe from where we are today, maybe we're in the middle of this storm. And it seems like it's a major one. Maybe it could be that it could be developing into a major storm and we just don't know what to do. But maybe if we just stop for a moment, if we stop trying to reason our way out of it, trying to logic our way out of it, trying to think our way out of it, trying to do everything that we can do, we will realize that Jesus is with us in the storm and in the boat. Hold that thought for a minute. The creator of the whole universe is with us. He's with us in the middle of all of this, in the middle of COVID-19, in the middle of economic uncertainty, in the middle of not knowing what is going to happen for the rest of the school year. Jesus is with us. The creator of the whole universe. And if we think about it, and we think back, and we think really hard, maybe we can remember that Jesus has told us, maybe he has told us what it is that we are going to do next, that there is a next step, that there is a way forward. And if we stop and we think, maybe we'll recall that and we will be able to trust him. That there is a next thing for us, that this isn't going to be the end of us. It may be difficult, but he is with us. And maybe what it means for us is that we need to turn to him. Instead of trying to do things on our own, instead of trying to reason things out for ourselves, we turn to him and we say, Jesus, help. And we let him deal with the circumstances and the situation. We let him deal with the fear. We let him deal with the worry. So this week, as we head towards Easter on Sunday, as we head to that day that we remember that Jesus overcame the biggest thing that anybody in the world is ever afraid of, death. As we come to Easter, let us remember that we have nothing to fear, because Jesus is with us in this boat, in our storm. He has overcome the storm, and he has overcome death. Have a good week, guys, and I'll see you through the window, if not through the door. God bless.